It's week 3 in the Cursed Kingdom, and we have even more poor, unfortunate souls attempting to enter and exit, while I remain trapped in the centre of this damn thing. I guess I shouldn't be complaining. I'm better off than a lot of folk trapped in this curse. At least I get visitors from the outside. Speaking of which, let's go and have a quick chat with today's guest. Donald J Bingle. Hello, Donald. It's a pleasure to have you in the Cursed Kingdom and helping me retain some sense of sanity in these dreadful times.
You are quite welcome.
I don't think you're enjoying yourself too much, though, or at least I'd hope you're not. It's quite miserable here. What were you going to say, sorry?
I was going to say it's raining here, but it's always nice to talk to friends.
Well, let's start by discussing you and your works. I noticed that you have a lot of various different genres. What's your favourite genre to write?
Well, when I look back at the various things I've written, the thing that I've discovered is that on the book side, I tend to write mostly thrillers of one stripe or another. They might be sci-fi thrillers, they might be spy thrillers, they might be mystery thrillers, but they all tend to have some kind of thriller aspect to them. Short stories are much more varied, and that's partly because in my early short story career, I did a lot of last-minute backup work for DAW through one of their packagers for their themed anthologies. So when they ended up a story short or everybody had written to the short end of the range, I would get very quick requests. We need a story for this anthology, this number of words, and we need it very quickly. And sometimes that would be fantasy anthology, sometimes it would be science fiction or steampunk or whatever. And so I ended up writing in a variety of genres for that reason.
So, when you were writing these books and these short stories, what do you tend to mostly focus on? Is it science fiction thrillers or fantasy thrillers that you more often write?
It really is quite varied. And partly that's because I'm not really that market oriented in terms of trying to specialize my writing in order to make it more sellable to a specific agent or publisher or niche audience. I think it's much more important if you're early in your career or you're very focused on being successful as a writer that you target an audience and you produce a lot of output for that particular audience. Since I'm not that focused on that, I write what I want to or what somebody asks me to. I literally have gotten requests to write things that I never would have thought to write if I hadn't gotten the request. For example, I had an editor of mine call me up and tell me that he had suggested my name to another editor and that I might be getting an email from an unexpected source, which was fine. So I get an email a few days later and it said, "Congratulations, you've been invited to write a story for Transformers Legends, and you can set your story in any one of the 5 Transformer universes." And Transformers are kids' toys that transform from robots into cars and back and forth. I was practicing law by the time those toys existed. I'd never paid much attention to them. But here I was being asked to write a story, and I had to do my research as to what the toys were and what the various characters were and what the different universes were, and turn around and write a short story in fairly short order because I was being asked to fill in because they were short. I never would have written a Transformers story, which I guess I would have needed permission to do anyhow because it's tie-in fiction, but I never would have thought to write that story if I hadn't been asked to write a story.
Very interesting. So, do you write because you enjoy writing, or is it a career choice?
There are parts of writing that are very enjoyable. I came to writing because I was a role-playing gamer. I played in a lot of RPGA, role-playing game association tournaments in the 80s, 90s. And I played a lot of different game systems, not just Dungeons and Dragons, but Time Master and Chill and Paranoia and Boot Hill and Star Frontiers and Star Wars and Star Trek and Gamma World and on and on and on. And so I got used to playing characters in a lot of different genres. I got used to doing dialogue at the spur of the moment for a lot of different characters, because classic role-playing tournaments were tournaments in which you didn't create your own character. You were given a character, their not only their statistics, but their personality, their background, and what they thought of the other characters that were involved in the particular quest, and you would play that character for 4 hours in the tournament. And that gave me a background for dialogue, quite frankly, characterization. And then when I started writing tournaments, you learn the basics of storytelling, developing red herrings, keeping the party on quest without hurting them too much, dropping clues that were not too obvious to mysteries and things like that. And I moved from that into writing for some of the game companies, and then moved from that into short stories. And basically all of that background led me to writing short stories. And it was a background, by the way, that I was happy to get into, because when I was in college, I was involved in parliamentary style debate, the type of debate you do in the UK, and not the type that's done that much in the United States. And that is in essence role-playing debate, because you can set the debate in any parliamentary body you choose in time or space. And so I had gotten some practice in role-playing even before I became a role player, and then that just led naturally into learning the techniques I needed in order to write stories.
Okay, so in our audience, we do have a lot of cosplayers that may be interested into going into roleplay tournaments. Could I ask a bit more about that? Like, how did it get started? How do you get started in that sort of thing?
Well, the role-playing community is a little different now from when it was back when I got involved in it. I got involved in it in 1979 because my brother, who's 11 years younger than I am, wanted to go to Gen Con, which at that time was held at the University of Wisconsin Parkside, and he wasn't old enough to drive. And I just finished my bar exam, and I could take a few days off to take him and a friend up to the convention in a camper, and they taught me about role-playing games. And that's how I got involved in those. Role-playing games at that time were very much the classic formula that I told you about, where you're given a character and asked to play it, and then at the end, everyone, including the person who runs the game, is asked to vote who played their character best. Gaming now is very much oriented towards what is called campaign style, where you make up a character and you play that character in a wide variety of tournaments and accumulate additional skills and treasure and that kind of thing during the course of these adventures. They're much less oriented toward playing a character role than they are into accomplishing the mission of the quest. And so it's a different style. But basically, you can go to any science fiction or game convention that has role-playing games of one type or another and tell them that you're new and you need help knowing what to do, what dice to roll, what your character is allowed to do, and how they need to express what they want to do. And the community is very, very open to newcomers. They want people to come into the hobby because that grows the hobby and makes for more interesting play, quite frankly. And so they will literally help you out through as many tournaments or scenarios or adventures, whatever you want to call them, as they need to until you learn what you want to learn and, pick up the necessary books or dice or whatever in order to play more independently. So I think it's a very easy hobby to get into if you are willing to go out and play games with strangers. It's also possible that you can find a game in your neighborhood or that your friends play and you can get into it that way. But I've always found conventions to be the fastest and most dependable way to get involved in a good game quickly.
Okay, and you mentioned that you've written for some games. Could you tell us what games you've written for?
I've written for a number of different game systems. In the Dungeons & Dragons world, I've written some material. Actually, the first assignment I got to write for a game company was to create monsters and to rewrite descriptions of existing monsters, which I did for a version of the Dungeons & Dragons Fiend Folio. But I've also written stories that tie into Dragonlance 5th Age in Dungeons & Dragons. I wrote an adventure for the Forgotten Realms, which is Ed Greenwood's world that people campaign in Dungeons & Dragons. I've also written some game material for Time Master, which is a time travel game that actually I bought after the company that published it went bankrupt and then later sold, but I wrote adventures for that. I wrote an adventure for Paranoia, which is a futuristic game with the world controlled by an all-knowing, all-seeing, and semi-deranged computer. I've written for Chill, which is a horror role-playing game, and a few other smaller things.
That sounds really awesome.
It was good fun.
It sounds it. I'd love to do something like that. So what difficulties have you faced when writing them?
When writing for games or writing story?
Both.
Both. The biggest difficulty with writing stories for me is knowing that I'm going to have to market them. One of the advantages that I had was being this kind of unofficial backup writer, because I knew if I wrote a decent story at the right length for the topic, that there was a high likelihood it would be bought. Most people don't have that luxury. Although some people get invited to write for specific anthologies, most writers out there are writing on spec. They're writing a story that they like to write, or they may be writing a story that is in response to an open call that hundreds of people will respond to, and they're trying to write a story that they think will stand out. And so the biggest hesitancy about writing those kinds of things is that you're going to end up spending much more time trying to find a market than it actually takes you to write the story in the first place. And that's just distressing, because it's not a fun aspect of being a writer. Books are similar. If you write a book and then try to sell it to either a traditional publisher or an agent, or get an agent to try and sell it to a traditional publisher, you can look forward to months and possibly years of time before it finds a home, and then once it finds a home, it could be a year before it comes out. One of the big advantages of self-publishing is you don't have that time lag, and you don't have that frustration. You can get a cover artist, you can hire your own editor, copy editor, you can get help with the formatting if you need help with the formatting, and you can put out the book yourself. Of course, you still have to market it and hope that people will review it and respond to it in some way that you'll sell enough copies to make all of that worthwhile, but at least you don't have the significant time lag. timeline can be particularly important in certain genres. Political and technical thrillers are among those because political events and technology advances can actually make a story stale before it gets to market if you're going the traditional route.
And what about in terms of games? What's the biggest difficulty you've had when writing? My biggest difficulty is deciding to do it. I am not of the persuasion that to be a writer you need to write every single day. And so I don't. I can go days or weeks or even occasionally months without writing a story or a part of a book. When I do write, I tend to write very fast. And so probably my biggest hurdle isn't writer's block, because it's not that I can't write, that I can't think of what happens next. It's that it's easy not to bother to write if there's not a deadline or an economic motivation or a huge chunk of time in which I have nothing else to do to motivate me to sit down and write. So the biggest difficulty is actually bothering to write. So what can you tell us about your creative process then?
I tend to write very quickly when I write. I don't have music on in the background. I don't want to be interrupted for any reason. I don't answer the phone. I don't answer the door. I try and have my puppies go as long as possible between needing walks, because it interrupts my process. And when I get into the flow of writing, any interruption can slow me down significantly. So that's probably the biggest thing about my process. I do not write in coffee shops. That would be too much of a distraction for me. I like not to be distracted when I'm writing and just focus everything on doing it. I also, in terms of process, am not a big outliner. I know a lot of people who are. For me, there are fun parts to writing and there are unfun parts to writing. And one of the fun parts of writing is figuring out how to get from one point to another point. And if I do all of that ahead of time, it makes writing it down kind of a tedious slog. But
so you're a dancer then, not a plotter.
Yeah, but it's not like I let the characters tell me what to do. That expression always bothers me because I'm a control freak and the characters do exactly what I want them to do. And I think people who just focus too much on what the characters might, could, whatever do tend to get themselves into writer's block because the characters end up going places that they haven't thought through. So I take, in my own mind, a more cinematic approach. I'm writing the scene, and if I were watching that scene as a television show, as a movie, what would I have happen next to keep the plot moving, to engage the viewer, which is actually a reader, but the viewer, since I'm thinking of it cinematically, and keep the pace so that it will fit within the appropriate amount of time that I can expect somebody to want to spend on it. And so that's organically how I go through the process. I know where I'm starting, I know where I'm eventually going, and I know 2 or 3 things I want to do along the way. And I may have written down little pieces of dialogue or little interesting things that could occur. But I look at all of that before I start writing, and I generally put that away, write whatever I'm writing, whether it's a story or a book, and then pull that out and see if I had anything on my sheet of paper that I want to go back and insert in some place, rather than, again, letting it pull me away from the flow of my writing. I don't edit at the same time you write. It's really a different skill. And although I used to, write a chapter and then edit that chapter and write the next chapter and then edit those 2 chapters and write the 3rd chapter, what I discovered over the course of my writing career is that ends up with the first part of the book over-edited and stilted. And the last couple projects I've done, I've literally not reread any part of the book until I've finished the first draft of the book.
So, do you base any of your characters on real-life people?
If I did, I would not say so. Because
well, that's one way to stay out of trouble, I guess.
I think it's dangerous to do that for a variety. I'm a lawyer by trade, and so I tend to be very risk adverse for that kind of thing. But certainly there are turns of phrase, there are little aspects of things, or there's an interesting name. Generally a first name or a last name, never the same from the same person, that you think is a cool sounding name that would fit for a particular story or character. So, look, all writing is based on the sum of your experience. And so I'm sure that things from real people get in there. And certainly things from my real life, altered substantially, of course, but things from my real life end up being useful for me when I'm writing. But I'm not one of the people who's like, oh, this character is based on this guy that I met in a nursing home, and this is based on my best friend George, and blah, blah, blah. I just don't do that.
So, what was your favourite book to write? Which one has been the most enjoyable?
You see, everybody asks that question. It's like, which is your favorite kid? And just, the answer always is the most recent thing you've written is the one that you like the most, because it's fresher in your mind. And quite frankly, you tend to learn things over the course of your career. And so I can go back to my first book and say, oh, there are things I really like about my first book. And I can also see things that I would have done differently now because I'm a more experienced writer. And I know, for example, I think it's important for authors to be very self-aware about the strong and weak parts of their writing. I'm stronger on dialogue. I tend to be a little bit of an overexplainer because I books that the characters do things as if there were a plan, and then of course things go awry and they work out in a different manner. But there was never, in my mind, a sensible plan that would have worked in the first place. And so there's a little bit probably over-explanation in some parts of my book because that's what I like. There's probably a little less description of people and what they look like, because when I read, I kind of gloss over that because I'm not terribly interested whether the guy had an angular face or a bulbous nose or a certain kind of haircut.
I do apologise, but we did lose connection with our guest, Donald J Bingle. However, I did manage to get hold of him again and we did continue the interview. However, there is a little bit missing here. So I do apologise for this, but I hope you enjoy the rest of the interview.
That probably meant I was pontificating too long.
Maybe. I found it interesting anyway. It's a shame I didn't get to hear the rest of the answer though. But it happens. So on to the next question. Do you intend to write any other books? Do you have any other books in the works at the moment?
Well, there is a third Dick Thornby spy thriller that I have the basic concept for, and when I got covers made for the first two books, I actually had a cover made up for the third at the same time so that they would have a consistent look and feel and color palette. Gene Raby, who was my author for the Love-Hate Case Files and who's written a lot more books than I have, is constantly encouraging me to write the third book in that series. So that's a possibility. Gene and I may write a sequel to the Love-Hate Case Files. So that's on the list. And I did come up with a concept for a dystopian YA book some years ago that's kind of sitting in my drawer that I may get around to writing. The thing about writing is that there's always plenty of ideas. It's
never ending.
We'll do the execution.
I can relate with that. The ideas are never ending.
It's why it's so amusing when someone will come up to you at a book fair or reading or whatever, and they say, "I have this great idea for a book. It's X, Y, Z. Why don't you write it and we'll split things 50-50?" And it's like, I have plenty of ideas. Here's an idea. Why don't you write your own book and I'll write mine?
Well, that is always a good, response. So, are there any publications coming up of any stories or anything like that?
Probably the next thing that is going to come up is that I've been asked to write tie-in fiction for someone who is going to be doing a Kickstarter for their fantasy world that will be playable by people who play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And he's gotten several other authors that gamers would know, like Gene Raby and Richard Knack and a few others to write tie-in fiction for his world when that world, is ready to produce as a game product. And so I've written the first draft of it. The person who's creating that world hasn't seen that draft yet. I'm letting it sit for a little before I revisit it to edit it or rewrite any portions of it. That's a very important part of the process, quite frankly, is, once you've finished the first draft, you really need to get a little bit of distance before you go back and try to edit it. You'll be more likely to see your mistakes and not just gloss over them if you give it a little time to get some distance. So that's probably the next thing that's going to come out. I don't know when that Kickstarter is going to happen, but I suspect it's going to be sometimes in the next 6 months. And I'll turn in that product, and I don't know where it will come out in terms of his list of things to put out for that world.
That sounds really awesome. You'll have to let me know when it does launch.
I will give you a link when the Kickstarter is available.
Hear that, everyone? When the Kickstarter is available, I'll be sure to put it all in this podcast. It was truly a pleasure to have you with us. Don't forget to grab one of the postcards by the door. With everyone coming and going here, I thought I might as well make some. And watch out for the Kraken, by the way. He's in a particularly bad mood today.
I will be sure to do that, and I enjoyed visiting your realm.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I found that interview with Donald J Bingle very insightful for me as a writer and as a prospective role player in the future. So I hope you enjoyed it. I am sorry, however, about the issues we did have with connection. As much as I tried to recover it, it's not the easiest thing to do, especially with this cursed land hating the internet. It's an unfortunate truth, but it's there. Now grab your hot chocolate and relax a bit, as today we are going to be listening to a cover artist, Caitlin Strandridge. I hope I said that right. So please relax and enjoy, and don't forget that all links will be available in the description down below. And don't forget to subscribe so that you stay up to date with everything we release on this channel. And we have so much content coming for you guys. So this is just your little reminder to click that subscribe button and that little bell, just so that you get notifications from us.
I was scared at dentist in the dark. I was scared of pretty girls and starting conversations. All my friends are turning green. You're the magician's assistant in their dreams.
It is now time to venture into the darkness of the unknown with a short story called Year of the Rat.
By Alec Peterson. Sir? The old man managed one eye open and groaned inwardly. The nurse before him was not who he was hoping for. Still, that wasn't her fault. No need to be rude. Yes, he coughed once. Yes, what do you need? Well, sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but my son is such a big fan of your films, and I was wondering... The old man coughed again, long and low, with a rasp, like burning leaves. He hated the affliction that had him hacking his life away one bloody handkerchief at a time. But he had no one to blame but himself. If he could fill his last days with good, maybe. Of course, it's no problem. I can sign something for you. The nurse's smile lit the room and almost made him smile back. It reminded him of his youth, the reason he started his legacy in the first place. There was nothing that made a person look better than a real smile. Oh, thank you so much, sir! She gushed as she handed him a picture of her son, he assumed. Bright-eyed, smiling and hopeful. The old man scrawled his name on the back of the boy's picture, the future. He felt a pang in his chest as he realized he would not meet this boy. He would never see anything affect anything in his life. Maybe after he was dead, the boy could sell the picture, buy some gum and soda with it. Lord, being trapped in his own body was making him cynical. "Oh, thank you," the nurse gushed. The old man settled back into his pillows and let the morphine work its magic, one miraculous drop at a time. His eyes wandered to his bedside table, seeking something, anything, to take his mind off his current situation. He smiled faintly at the white mice gambling in their cage. Most people at St. Joseph's weren't allowed to have pets, but being famous did have its advantages. He had always liked mice, the clever, winsome things. Rats, though, were a different story entirely. He shuddered hard, his body bending under the storm of coughing. Rat. Such an innocent word to bring so much agony. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" The old man looked at the door. The honest answer was no, but he was saved from answering by the teary-eyed but straight-faced young woman standing next to the boy. "Hello, Chris." "Hi, Diane." Grandpa gave them a weak smile. Diane came to the side of the bed and kissed her father on the forehead. "Mom and Sharon are downstairs. They wanted a word with the doctor. Christopher just couldn't wait to see you." Grandpa held his arms out to Christopher, who smiled a gap-toothed grin at him before giving him a hug that would have been far too hard if not for the morphine. A shadow passed across the wall, angular and sinister. The old man's arms instinctively tightened on his grandson as if to protect him. Diane saw the flicker of panic on his face, misinterpreted it as pain. "Careful, Chris." "No, he's all right," Grandpa said, through another fit of coughing. Why don't you go get us an ice cream?" "Would you like an ice cream, Chris?" The answer, of course, was an affirmative. Diane left with an order for 2 chocolate cones. Christopher chattered about his school, his friends. The words barely pierced the haze of opiates until the old man heard it again. "Did you say rat, Chris?" The old man almost choked on the hated word. His grandson nodded the affirmative. "Yes, sir. At the pet shop. He's white with a long tail. Mom promised I could get a pet, so..." Christopher was a smart young lad. He noticed that his grandpa was looking less than pleased. "You don't like rats, Grandpa?" He could just let it go. Just make some non-committal comment, deflect suspicion, let his grandson have his damn pet without tainting it. But here, with the shadows closing in and the end coming fast, the old man felt like he would go mad if he didn't tell someone. "Chris, did I ever tell you about when I went to Chinatown? I was a young man then." "I'm very sorry, sir, but your loan application has been denied." Walt frowned as he tried to untangle the man's garbled speech. The man clearly had some kind of larynx infection or a cleft palate that made it impossible to understand a word he said. But Walt had been rejected enough times recently to know when it happened again. "We simply don't feel confident in the proposal. We have a responsibility." "I'm sorry," Walt said through gritted teeth, "but I can't understand a word you're saying." Being turned down for the umpteenth time in a row was bad enough, but the man was completely unintelligible, and it was an exercise in frustration trying to make any sense of what he had to say. "I'm saying no, Mr. Disney. We cannot fund your playground." "Amusement park," Walt snapped. "Playgrounds are for small children. My amusement park will be for kids of all ages and their families." The man's expression slid into that combination of apathy and ignorance that made Walt's teeth ache and his fists tighten. This bureaucratic drone, this rube, had all the imagination of a low-watt bug zapper, and yet he had the gall to deny him his dream. Deny the children the wonder he would bring them. This mush-mouthed, pea-brained, "I'm sorry, sir. Betty, send in the next customer, please." The banker's voice cut through Walter's anger and forced him to focus once more on the here and now. Out of luck, out of hope, and just plain screwed. He stood up with his eyes screwed shut, trying to tune out the man's infuriating voice. He turned and stormed away from the man's desk, but stopped short when he was confronted with the banker's face on the wall. "Donald Drake, Employee of the Month." Walt snorted angrily. "Yeah, right." After adjusting his hat, Walt looked out into the city and the people that filled it. They looked bored, uninspired, like something vital was missing from their lives. "Wonder," he concluded. "They have lost their sense of wonder." And thanks to Donald, the unintelligible loan officer, they would remain without wonder and without hope. Just like me. Shoulders slumped, Walt pushed his way out of the bank branch office and onto the streets of San Francisco.
"Mister, can you spare a dime?" Walt turned as he heard a small voice. The child couldn't have been older than 6 or 7 and was cradling the fattest cat he'd ever seen, a huge black and white beast with a feral eye, and possessed of a thoroughly disagreeable countenance. "What? Oh, yeah, sure." Walt sighed and fished around in his pocket and removed a grimy coin. "Running short on these," he thought grimly to himself. Still, the children had to come first. "Here you go, son." He stretched out his hand towards the boy, when suddenly the fat cat hissed and swiped at him. The claws connected and drew blood. "Ow!" Walt shrieked and yanked his hand back, dropping the coin onto the floor. "Hey, what's the big idea?" "Sorry, mister," the boy offered. "Pete doesn't like you." "Looks like Pete doesn't like anybody," the older man grumbled and scanned the dirty ground looking for the coin as he sucked on the bleeding wound. "I believe you are looking for this." Man and boy turned and witnessed Sinia's shadow detach itself from the darkness around the walls and struck towards them. It was a woman, but such a woman neither had ever seen. Hair was as dark as the midnight sky of the ocean, with skin as pale as the moon and eyes the colour of amber. She was clearly of Asian descent, but her features were unconventionally voluptuous, in a manner not often seen amongst her people. Walt's mouth ran dry at the sight of her. "You gape as if you haven't seen a woman before," the woman teased in a thick accent. "No, I've just..." Walt struggled to regain his footing. He was a salesman. He was supposed to dominate in any conversation that he was a part of. Take control like a proper man should. Besides, he was married, for God's sake. "Forgive me." Walt's tone became urban and calm as he slid into his confident persona as a hand to a glove. "I've simply never seen a woman like you. You're quite striking. For a celestial." "No, Again, the exotic woman caught him up short, and she now approached him with all the confidence that he wished he possessed. Upon closer inspection, her features weren't quite flawless. Her chin was a little pronounced. her nose a bit too sharp for those soft eyes that upon closer inspection possessed a yellowish hue and a feral quality. "It's quite all right," the woman assured him. "My appearance has been the object of curiosity and fascination for a very long time." Walt smirked with a smugness he didn't feel. Fascination might be a bit much. Would it? She quirked her lips and smiled, no, leered at him. The expression looked hungry and most unsettling, but he could not force himself to look away from that luscious mouth with lips the colour of the very best of wines and the very worst of intentions. "You continue to gape, kind sir." Walt shook himself hard and then frowned. "Hey, where'd the kid go?" The woman shrugged. He no doubt bolted back down his hole. Mortimer can be quite the dormouse at times, I'm afraid. The woman was making Walt uncomfortable. She moved like a woman. What a woman! But she spoke with a man's confidence, using words and tones that were supposed to be soul purview of the stronger sex. This woman was thoroughly alien to him. An angry rumbling from his stomach interrupted his reverie and replaced his rising indignity with mortification. "Why, good sir, you sound positively famished." She laughed, a rich, sweet sound, and when her mouth opened, Walt was startled to see her teeth were rather distinctly pointed and discoloured as well, a faint yellow that seemed to be an identical shade as her eyes. On anyone else, they would convey an impression of pestilence, but on her they simply added to riddle of her allure. "Oh, heck, Miss Migny," she replied easily. "At your service, good sir." And this unsettlingly confident woman shocked him with a curtsy. "You can call me Walt," he replied. "And yeah, I had to skip breakfast to make a meeting. Man business, you know how it is." "And how did your man business proceed?" Her tone teasing, she was laughing at him. "Well, it's very technical. I wouldn't want to bore you with the details. You were rejected, weren't you?" Walt's humiliation was compounded tenfold by her mocking expression, perfectly contrite in its demureness, yet serving as only the thinnest of veneers, concealing the deepest and most hidden of depths, and swirling somewhere within those forbidden waters lurked something completely unknown to him. You were turned away by limited men of limited minds, living limited lives, blind to the elegance of your imagination." She kept her gaze downcast as she approached him, appearing almost submissive, and then her yellow eyes locked onto his, and all vestiges of submission vanished. "Unworthy of the beautiful that your most worthy of imaginations would bestow upon the world." "Yes!" Walt croaked. "Yes, exactly!" He couldn't look away. He was enthralled, and even as he felt everything he had been raised to believe without propriety, the rightness of society, and the correctness of its ways and ethics, his sense of individuality fueled by the same imagination that had brought him to this desolate time and place in his life, burnt through the costume society had forced him to wear since his birth like a bonfire through tissue paper. "You have such gifts to bestow upon a world that spurn them, and when they should be receiving your very existence as the blessing it truly is." "Yes, I can't make them understand." Minyi slipped her pale, slender arm through his own, and in that moment he was a successful man, about town escorting this rarest of treasures through a world filled with only possibilities. "I will understand," she whispered to him, "if you would be willing to explain your man business to me over dinner." Of course," Walt stammered. He was grinning like an idiot, and for once he didn't care if he looked stupid. He was with her and she with him. Everything would be all right. "Right this way, good sir." "Walt, please." Minyi smiled coyly. "As you like, Walt." Walt couldn't get over how good he felt in Minyi's presence. She had taken him straight through the heart of Chinatown, and now, cutting through side street and alley, the man found that he felt confident, ready and able to take on the world on his terms and no one else's. A free man. His own man. "Tell me, Walt," Minyi cooed. "What spurred you to give one of your last dimes to child?" Walt's confidence faltered for a moment as raw emotion replaced it. The children are our future. They deserve nothing less than everything in our power it is to give. It has been said that children owe their parents an obligation, especially in their later years. She stepped over a pair of what appeared to be squabbling chipmunks, continuing. "Society teaches us that children owe their parents everything, for it was they who bestowed upon them the gift of life." It's called a gift of life and not a debt, because it's not some marker to be called in by the child's parents when things get tough. He countered, with a bit more fire than he intended. Parents may give their children life, but children give their parents' lives meaning. He noted the squabbling chipmunks, a pair of truly ridiculous-looking creatures, with mild curiosity, before returning to his conversation. Children don't owe their parents. Parents owe their children. The exotic-looking woman lifted an eyebrow in polite interest. "Is that how it is?" she asked mildly. "That's how it is," Walt confirmed. Indeed. In the years that followed his encounter with Minyi, Walt would always remember that smile and wonder why it failed to fill him with the sense of dread and foreboding that it should have in hindsight. But for this moment, as Minyi opened the door for Walt into a small cafe tucked away in the corner of the cul-de-sac, he couldn't think of anything else other than how absolutely ready he was to eat. The barking of the wildly overexcited dog caught Walt's attention upon the threshold of the small bistro. And as a mangy-looking dog came trundling up the street to greet them, he tried not to flinch. This was not his lucky day when it came to animals, a notion confirmed by the stinging sensation in his hand from Pete the cat's wicked claws. "Good boy, Mars," the woman cooed and scratched the unkempt animal behind its ears. It obligingly slobbered in joy at his mistress's touch. "Mars?" Walt scoffed. "You named your dog Mars?" "I did. Do you not like it?" She pouted prettily, but Walt refused to be suckered any further by the beautiful woman's feminine wiles. "Kind of a goofy name for a dog, ain't it?" The woman smiled thinly. "Why, Mr. Disney, do tell. Which god would you name your dog after?" Walter's hackles rose. Religion had been a matter of no small devotion, both in his upbringing and now in his adult life. There's only one God, and the Lord Jesus Christ is his Son and the Saviour of the world. Such a limited view for such an imaginative man. She appeared amused, but Walt hadn't become a semi-successful businessman without learning how to read people, even as inscrutable as his escort. He could tell she was in fact irritated with his reply. He could almost hear gritting those small, sharp yellow teeth in her otherwise flawless mouth. You forget that my people had our own gods and spirits for thousands of years before your own. A wrong answer is a wrong answer, no matter how old it may be. Min Yi shook her head. You should be careful with such words, Walt. You would not want the most imaginative man of his generation to leave behind a legacy of bigotry and intolerance instead, would you? She didn't wait for an answer, instead gliding away as effortlessly as a leaf on the wind, leaving Walt to mumble in her wake. Still a goofy name for a dog. Walt frowned as he entered the empty room. There's nobody here. I'm very selective about the company I keep for dinner, was the woman's only response. She moved to an extremely ornate table made of lacquered wood and painted red with gold inlay and adorned with thick candles. Nice piece, Walt noted. Antique? Min Yi purred. Extremely. It's been in my family for many generations. You've still got family back in? Walt frowned. Well, I'm assuming you're from China? Originally. But my family and I immigrated here at the turn of the 1800s. You and your family? Walt grinned easily. He was starting to get used to this strange woman's sense of humour. He felt sure in his ability to keep the upper hand. Like anything else, it was all about confidence. Well, you look very well preserved for 100 years and change. Thank you. Chuckling to himself, Walt frowned at the designs engraved on the table. I don't think I recognise these designs. I imagine you would not, Min Yi confirmed. These are the representations of the Chinese zodiac. Huh, Walt shrugged. Takes all kinds, he thought to himself with the smug superiority that comes to all men who believe themselves in possession of a firm command of their world. He loved how she could make him feel like this. What, so you read the future in the stars or something like that? He smiled self-consciously. It all sounded so ridiculous. Something like that, she confirmed coyly. She gently rapped her knuckles on the table. The sound resounded through the otherwise empty room. Suddenly, they were no longer alone as a pair of Asian waiters entered, each bearing a silver pot. Walt thought he detected the scent of frying oil, and he sniffed twice. Are we having fried food? You have a very keen nose, Min Yi confirmed. I like that in a man. Walt blushed at her tone, even as his pulse quickened at all the conjecture the primal part of his brain spawned regarding what else she liked in a man. What year were you born, Walt? She asked, playfully. 1901, he replied as he took himself out of his reverie. Oh, she frowned prettily. The year of the ox. What's that now? Each year in the zodiac corresponds with an animal. Yours is an ox. An ox, huh? He laughed. Well, you wouldn't be the first woman to call me that. Really? Minnie purred, as the waiters lit a small flame under one of the 2 silver pots and put down a variety of odd-looking implements that Walt could only guess were exotic Chinese dining utensils. Is there anything particularly ox-like about you, Walt? The man's mouth ran dry at her tone, and his brain immediately locked up. He frantically attempted to get a handle on the situation and remain in control. Tell me, have you considered putting aside all this hocus-pocus and accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Saviour? Actually, I was considering that if you were just 1 year older, you would have been born in the year of the rat, which is when my family came to these shores. It is my favourite sign of the zodiac. Walt smirked. They were back on this old joke. Women could be such silly little things once they got a notion in their head. Well, I guess I'm stuck being a cow. Ox, she gently corrected. And you don't strike me as an ox. I don't? Not at all, she smiled. Those born and beholden to the year of the rat are characterised by their wit, their creativity and ambition. She looked away demurely. Their charm. No kidding, Walt grinned. You think I'm charming? Why don't we discuss it over dinner? Of course. Walt remembered his manners and helped Migny into her chair. Such good manners. Migny smiled at him with her wine-coloured lips and her small, sharp-looking teeth. Clearly, you're a man of excellent taste. I do try, he assured her, lending himself to a swagger as he took his own seat opposite her. Frowning, he picked up a pair of tongs. What are we having? Fondue? Very similar to fondue. Hoekyo. Hoekyo? He tried to wrap his mouth around the strange words. What is that? Chinese? Yes, she informed him casually. It means hot pot. She removed the lid from the first silver pot, revealing a steaming cauldron of bubbling oil. 1,000 different spiced scents emanated from its rolling depths. Walt leaned over carefully to avoid splatter and inhaled deeply. Oh, it smells heavenly. Indeed it does. Her eyes reflected liquid gold in the dim light of the room. Are you ready for the main course? Absolutely. Still smiling, Migny removed the heavy silver lid from the second pot and revealed a squirming swarm of newborn baby mice. Bon appétit. She leaned forward across the table. That's French. It means good appetite. God almighty! Walt screamed, leaping out of his chair and knocking it backwards to the floor. Sit down! And suddenly, Migny wasn't Migny any longer. Her roar washed over Walt like a storm. It nearly battered him to his knees. Through the fires of the candlelight, Walt saw her form wavered and shifted in the shadows. She wasn't a woman at all, but some horrible creature like a like a giant rat. What's the matter? Don't you want to screw me anymore? The rat thing that was once a woman hissed at him. What are you? I am old, Walt. My kin and I dwelt among you for thousands of years in our home, within amongst the three kingdoms, the dynasties in the Celestial Empire. We came across the ocean in tramp freights, held within the hearts and minds. Walt was trying and failing to get a grip on reality. That most spacious of homes, their imaginations, Walt, fueled by their mighty hearts, just like yours. Nothing in Walt's religion, his upbringing, nothing in his life could prepare him for what he was seeing. He fished around in his shirt and produced his cross. Back! Get thee behind me, Satan! The rat thing looked irritated. My kin and I existed long before that pale carpenter, and we shall exist long after his memory is lost to the ages. You're a liar! Walt screamed. You're the devil! I am neither. The rat beast hissed. And before you run out that door, ask yourself, where was God when that gruesome son of a in the bank turned you down for your loan? And the one before him, and the one before that. How did you? I know you, Walt. The rat creature's tone became soft and consoling. The frustrated dreamer, betrayed by a world that neither wants nor understands them. All you have ever wanted, ever done, is to bring back hope, happiness, wonder. Walt jolted as the demon's words found his heart and squeezed. What do you want from me? The demon crossed around the table, and suddenly she was Minyi again. Beautiful, mysterious, able to inspire wonder and fascination in his bones and blood. In a manner that nothing, not even God, had ever stirred in him. I want you to remain true to yourself. I want you to show the same courage you've shown all your life in sustaining your dream, in keeping it alive, and apply it to turning it into a reality. For a long time, Walt looked between the woman, the dinner table with its squirming contents, and the door. And if I want to leave? He asked quietly. And go where? Back home to whatever nothing life you left behind? The church that didn't provide the answers you needed? The family that couldn't understand you? Your so-called friends that mocked and laughed at you? The bureaucrats and the dull-minded that have held you down and frustrated all your life, when all you've tried to do is make the world a better place? The slight woman shrugged. You can go back to that if you really want to. I certainly won't stop you. But rest assured, Walt, despair will kill you far more cruelly than I. Gently, the rat that wore a woman's disguise took his hands away from his cross Ask yourself, Walt, between me and the rest of your world, who's done more to hurt you? Walt struggled for a moment, the last vestiges of the man he had been before he entered this private hell slipping through his fingers like sand. He released his cross and took her hand in his. Are you going to take my soul? She nodded. Yes, I am. Walt shuddered as his damnation loomed before him. He didn't believe it, not for a second, he told himself. God would protect him as he always had. But if this woman could get him what he needed, and what do I get? Everything, she whispered. Open doors that I will walk you through, smiling faces to greet you. All the love and support you could ever ask or need to make our vision a reality. Our vision? Minier's face looked sad. For a moment, she seemed almost vulnerable, human. My family wastes their time attempting to resurrect the old glories of the Middle Kingdom. But in this America, this land of opportunity, I believe that it could be the newest and greatest kingdom. She gestured towards the man. And you could bring about the first kingdom of the new world. A kingdom of dreams. A magic kingdom, Walt said softly. Yes. Walt licked his lips, looked down at his shaking hands. What happens to me after you die? She asked gently. Walt couldn't finish the sentence and simply nodded. I honestly don't know, she replied gently. Nobody does. Not even my kin knows what happens on the other side. Walt drew in a long, quivering breath and then nodded. What do I need to do? There must be an offering made. It is the old way, of flesh and faith. She gestured at the cross that hung bleedingly around his neck. You have made your sacrifice. Now I must make mine. The rat woman took Walt by the hand and led him back to the table, lifting up the heavy chair with one hand and settling it back to its place at the table. She guided him back to the chair and the squirming pink mass in the silver pot. What are they? The man frowned, trying not to be violently ill at the sight. You said the children are the future. She gestured at creatures still mewing and clawing at the air blindly. These are mine. They're my pups, only a few moments old. She smiled sadly, and Walt again felt a moment of pity for this creature before him. They haven't even opened their eyes, still blind to the horrors of this world. What? Take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do ye as oft as you drink it in remembrance of me. Walt stared uncomprehendingly at the rat demon, and then realization hit him. He felt faint. Only her grip on his shoulder kept him from passing out completely. The tongs, the boiling oil. You want me to... With a tremendous sadness, Minyi stroked a tiny rat baby with a long claw-like fingernail across their cheek, tenderly, and Walt once again saw her form shift. Between that of the monstrous form of the bloated rat thing and the diminutive, exotic creature that had brought him so much hope in the last few hours. With her free hand, she offered Walt one of the pairs of the tongs as the baby rat nuzzled his mother's claw. Walt, think of the children. Well, that was certainly a unique take to Walt Disney's story and the introduction of all the characters we know now. I hope you enjoyed it. Sadly, because of how long that short story was, there won't be another one in today's show. However, you can look forward to our short story special coming out very soon, so keep your eyes for that. It will be jam-packed with new stories for you to listen to. Unfortunately today, because of so many technical difficulties I've had doing this, and physical technical difficulties, I guess you could say, with the fact that I had a throat infection last week, which is why this episode is a week late, we are unfortunately going to have to miss our second interview in this podcast, because unfortunately the file has corrupted. However, hopefully, if I can arrange it, we will have an interview with the lovely, the amazing Caitlin Allison next week if I can arrange another interview with her and to record it for you guys. I am so sorry. So, onto the review segment of this lovely series. We are now going to be looking at 10 Cloverfield Lane. As usual, written by Charlie Dixon. So, I have just finished watching this movie just now, so I will be giving my opinion in regards to this. This movie is slightly different from the Cloverfield film. For example, 10 Cloverfield Lane is not a found footage film this time round. Even though I do like a good found footage film, I am glad that they did not do it with this film. There are 3 main characters in this, and all 3 of them are hiding out in a bunker waiting for the all clear from the military due to the bad airflow and aliens, best way in putting it. It's a sci-fi psychological horror film. It was written by Dan... I have no idea how to pronounce his last name. Trachtenberg? I suck at this, okay? I know. And produced by J.J. Abrams. Abrams? I suck at this today. I'm so sorry, guys. You know, the guy who likes to use lens flares in most of his stuff. But I give credit to the guy as he has made some decent films. And also produced by Lindsay Weber. Michelle awakens in a bunker with 2 men named Howard and Emmett. She has been told by both of them that there has been an alien attack and they must stay inside the bunker at all costs. Though Howard's and Emmett's intentions become questionable, which makes Michelle think, is it better in here or out there? Right, time to talk characters. Michelle, played by my woman crush, Mary Winstead, who is well known in playing Ramona Flowers in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I think her character was quite well written, and her character gotten better over time throughout the movie. She did a great job with the character's emotions in the situation she was in, and I enjoyed her character. She was a strong female lead. Next up, we have Emmett, who is played by John Gallagher Jr. Now, I know he has been in a few TV programs, but this was the first for me to see him act. I personally did not like his character. And I felt like the character was a bit dull for me. But I did like the chemistry his character had for Michelle. But overall, he was my least favourite. Now for the final character, Howard, who is played by John Goodman. He did the voice of Sully in Monsters, Inc., and I adore him to bits. His character, Howard, is my favourite in the whole film. His emotions, his acting skills are just great, and I enjoyed watching him on screen. I liked how his character slowly developed further into the film. And out of all three of them, John Goodman did the greatest. Okay. Now let me talk about scenes that I liked and disliked. I loved the opening title into the film. It was interesting. I loved how the car kept rolling names of the producers and cast showed up. And when the car stopped, the title came up. I was pretty impressed by this, as not a lot of films go into it that way. Now, I did not like the very beginning, spoiler alert, where she took off her wedding band and Ben calls her phone. We did not get much information from that, and I thought it was kind of pointless. Any lessons to learn from this movie? Don't use your phone whilst driving. You'd have thought that was obvious, but people are stupid. Do I think people will learn this lesson? Well, I hope so, as driving whilst on your phone is dangerous. And considering I keep intersecting on this anyway with my own thoughts, just based off the writing, is pretty moronic too. Driving with your phone. Just saying. If you drive with your phone, you're a moron. But that's just my 2 cents on the matter. Anyway, back to the review. I think people who are into psychological films will enjoy this movie, and those who enjoy a good plot twist. I did watch it with my housemate, Loz, so she does have some final thoughts on this movie. I rate this movie an 8 out of 10. It's better than the first film. The characters were developed nicely, though I did not like Emmett's character, but overall, a very enjoyable movie. Loz also rated it an 8 out of 10. Loz's thoughts. So, I went into this movie with blind thoughts since I've seen the first film only once, and remember not really enjoying it due to the POV not being great. But when I saw that this wasn't going to be a POV movie, I was intrigued. Once the main plot kicked in, I was immediately reminded of Stephen King's Misery, with the whole car accident, then keeping the victim hostage. But as the movie kept going, it became its own story with some plot twists and edge-of-the-seat moments. I was feeling more adrenaline from this movie than any horror film I have seen in the last 5 years. So, that's the end of the review, and I've got to say that sounds like a film that I'm definitely going to be watching in the next couple of weeks. Based off that, it does sound kind of intriguing, because I haven't watched it. Anyway, I know today hasn't been our usual setup. There's a lot of music lacking, and I have had so many technical difficulties, so we've only had one interview, but that may become a more regular thing, as it's easier to do 1 interview a week than it is to do 2. I also had a lot of technical difficulties with the fact that I could only record 1 short story, because last week I was unfortunately ill with a really bad throat infection and couldn't record. But also because I am going to be releasing over the next week a short story special for you guys, just to kind of make it up to you for the fact that I missed last week. So I am so sorry for all this. I know it's like my 3rd week and I couldn't even keep it consistent. I suck. I suck at life. I'm cursed. Quite literally. I'm in the cursed kingdom, for fuck's sake. If you do prefer this accidental format, then let me know in the comments and I'll see about altering my regular content to being more like this. If not, I'll go back to the way it was originally. But I am so sorry. Anyway, if you did enjoy the content today, don't forget to press that subscribe button, click the bell, and give us a comment and a like, of course. Our goal this week is to reach 100 likes. If we can do that, that would be amazing. So please, press that like button. Let's do this thing. Let's reach that goal. And if you've not all lost every ounce of sanity you had left during this podcast, I hope to see you again next week. So don't forget to tune in, because I know it, you know it, deep down, you really enjoyed this. It made this curse a little less dreadful.
Weep for yourself, my man, you'll never be what is in your heart. Weep, little lion man, you're not as brave as you were at the start. Rake yourself and rake yourself, take all the courage you have left. Waste it on fixing all the problems that you made in your own head. But it was not your fault but mine, and it was your heart on the line. I really fucked it up this time, didn't I, my dear? Didn't I, my dear? Tremble for yourself, my man, you know that you have seen this all before. Tremble, little lion man, you'll never settle any of your scores. Your grace is wasted in your face, your boldness stands alone among the wreck. Now learn from your mother or you'll spend your days biting your own neck. But it was not your fault but mine, and it was your heart on the line. I really fucked it up this time, didn't I, my dear? But it was not your fault but mine, and it was your heart on the line. I really fucked it up this time, didn't I, my dear? Didn't I, my dear? But it was not your fault but mine, and it was your heart on the line. I really fucked it up this time, didn't I, my dear? But it was not your fault but mine, and it was your heart on the line. I really fucked it up this time, didn't I, my dear? Didn't I, my dear?